Hello fellow StarCraft 2 players and welcome to another GosuBuilds guide. This time we're going to be looking at Bomber's TVP build. Now this build is very close to the normal 1-Rax FE. There's very few variations and they're pretty subtle, so if you're below, I would say Diamond, like Plat or below, it's probably not going to be any big deal between this build and the standard 1-Rax FE into Medivacs build. However, this one, it really has some subtle variations that Bomber kind of figured out on his own that let the opener be more streamlined, and then it lets you power into the mid-game with a lot more infrastructure than you would normally have. But again, if you're probably Plat or below is what I would say, most likely you're not going to see any difference between this build and the standard 1-Rax FE build in TVP. Now going ahead right here, we see that it starts just like normal, and it will be normal for the first 3 or 4 minutes, I would say, with this 10 depot. And then you're going to see a 12 racks in a second and no gas because it is a 1-Rax FE. Now let me talk a little bit about why you would do this build over the other build. Now this build is, like I said before, very focused for the mid-game aggression and very focused on powering once you get your Medivacs out and once you have a lot of infrastructure up. So what it means is around this time, Protoss usually, if we're talking 11-minute mark, 12-minute mark, 13-minute mark. Protoss usually has Colossus out. They usually have their AoE out, maybe Storm or Colossus. But with this build, you have a ridiculous amount of bio. So you can actually trade somewhat effectively even through the AoE that they have, and you can continue your mid-game fighting, not dropping, but actually straight up engaging through the 13-ish minute mark just by powering at the front with some Vikings if they have Colossus, but really just microing and having a lot of bio that you're constantly reinforcing. And you'll see that this build gets out 5 barracks extraordinarily quickly to get all of that bio for the mid-game. Now, one thing that Bomber does is he scouts somewhat late in this matchup because he likes to save all the minerals and make sure that he's doing very, very small amounts of pulling guys off the mineral line and scouting, because he likes the minerals. Okay, so now let me pause it for a second, and now we've actually gotten to this build. We see that you got the 10 depot, the 12 barracks, and then over here it's the 17 command center after the first marine, but note that this right here, this barracks, is not building a second marine. So just like the normal 1-Rax FE, when you do not get the second depot, you have to cut a marine right here. And this marine will be cut for less time if you scout later. So this is one of the reasons why Bomber likes to scout later, so that this marine will come up pretty soon. So at 17 supply, you got the orbital, you got the CC on the low ground, and you can build this on the high ground too, but usually you build it on the low ground. And then you get the supply depot, and then you can resume SCV and marine production. And that's just one of those small adjustments that you can do if you're trying to get your command center on the low ground before this second depot. And I've talked about this before, but it's still something that comes up. Now, with this build, it is, like I said, powering for the mid-game. However, its early game is actually somewhat flimsy. So Bomber actually blindly usually gets this bunker on the low ground before his second and third barracks. Most TVP builds, I would say, get the barracks get the bunker after those 2 barracks. But in this one, he gets this bunker and then these 2 barracks. And this is because his early game with this build is very flimsy, specifically because the entire build is designed around the mid-game. Okay, now here's where the build differs. You get this refinery at 23, 24 supply after you build these 2 barracks, and you do not get the second refinery instantly. And you'll see in a second why he does this, but the reasoning behind it is you don't really need the gas that early. And what's the whole point of bio? You need a lot of minerals. So he kickstarts this by getting this first refinery and not the second one, and then getting the second one at a reasonable time. Going forwards, he gets the orbital on the low ground, he fills this bunker up, and you'll see he'll have around 25 gas, or I'll have around 25 gas as soon as this third barracks finishes, and you instantly start the tech lab. So now you've got 2 bases going, you're going to be constantly muling, constantly building SCVs, all that good normal stuff, and you're going to be producing 3 marines at a time. And once you start this tech lab, that's when you can finally get your second gas. So we'll see. I think I do it a little bit late in this build, but usually you want to get this second gas right around now. Now would be a good time to get it, just before you start stim. There we go. I'm like 5 seconds late. So notice, because you only got 1 gas, you can't start stim instantly. So, you need to start stim as soon as you get 100 gas. It will be a little bit late, but because it's a little bit late, what ends up happening is you have these more minerals, and these more minerals mean A, don't get supply blocked like I did, and B, once you get to the 830 mark, you actually can afford to get 2 more barracks. I'm going to repeat that. 830 mark, you get to get 2 more barracks. Now, those 2 barracks push you up to 5, and you end up getting a ridiculous amount of army because of how early you get these 2 extra barracks, and we'll see that happen in a second. At 100 gas after stim, start this factory, start the NG bay, and then you should delay this gas a little bit, but you end up getting the 3rd gas. Again, all at the same time, just like every other build ever. Factory, NG bay, 3rd gas. And then finally, you can get add-ons. You don't want to get them until basically this factory is done and you started your starport, because otherwise you're just not going to be able to afford the +1 and the factory. But some people like to get their add-ons a little bit earlier. Notice how I actually got a 2nd bunker at the front here, and this is because you have lots of extra minerals, because you've been cutting gas so much, and so you can actually afford to build these extra bunker, or 2, usually 1, if you're feeling unsafe. So the factory finishes, you start the starport, and then you see that's when I finally threw down the add-ons. Bomber likes to get a reactor and then a tech lab. I, however, have experimented with this build a lot on the ladder and just throughout the game. And I end up getting both reactors here, and then these 2 barracks end up getting tech labs. You're going to want to get to 3 tech labs and 2 reactors anyway on the barracks, but because these are happening right now and your money's really low, and tech labs build faster than reactors, getting the tech labs on the later ones means I feel like your army can reinforce faster. So that's my gut reaction. I'm not actually sure about that, but in this build, reactor and tech lab, because that's what Bomber does, and he's really good. So it's probably a good idea to follow what he does. And here's the 830 mark. Like I said, you were able to throw down 2 extra barracks. And now you have 5 barracks. Even before your starport's finished, you have 5 barracks started or done. And then now is around the time that you have 3 gas geysers, your NG bay's working, everything's working, you float out your factory, you float out on your starport, and you start making medevacs 2 at a time. And finally, 2 medevacs, there we go. And finally, we have our infrastructure done. Stim is done, and it's at the 9-minute mark, which is before most aggression will ever happen. Combat shields have started. I can start concussive shells right now if I wanted to, but I'm not pushing out just yet, and that research is really quick. So, that's up to you, obviously, when specifically you want to get that, but now these 2 barracks finish, you add on, see, again, in order to get 2 reactors and 3 tech labs, you have to get a reactor and a tech lab here, or you can do these 2 are reactors and these 2 are tech labs, personal preference. Okay, so now at this point, you want to be getting your 4th gas. I do that very late on this build because I was still not quite sure exactly how to do it, but this 5 racks, 3 Marauders at a time, 2 reactors, 4 Marines at a time, and 2 medevacs or 2 Vikings at a time means your army is able to reproduce ridiculously quickly, and you just have such a nice timing attack. Notice how when I'm moving out, it is the 10-20 mark. It's not actually that early, but the whole point of this move out is not to engage your opponent. The point of this move out is to only engage your opponent once these 5 racks have kicked in. Because you cut lots of corners in the early game, most of your bio and stuff won't be out until you have all 5 racks producing. So you want to wait for 1 or 2 waves of these 5 racks, and it'll be around 11:30 or 12 before you should commit to an engage. And that is when you've taken advantage of Bomber's build, and you're able to power into the mid-game. And so that's the build. I'm just going to go through it one more time. The strength of it is definitely the mid-game, and the strength of it is like right around now in the game time when you're pushing out, when Protoss wants to be taking a third, you're going to have this ginormous amount of bio, and you're able to take complete map control. So just going through the build again, you get a 10 depot, a 12 racks, a orbital command in your main, and all on 17 supply, orbital command, command center on the low ground, and then second depot. Then you resume SCV and marine production, and then you go for the bunker on the low ground to be safe, and then the 2 barracks, or you can do the 2 barracks and then the bunker on the low ground, and then 1 gas, not 2, 1 gas. And then you start the tech lab with 25 gas. It's usually on the 3rd barracks as soon as it finishes. You start the tech lab, you get your 2nd gas, you start stim, and then you get your factory with the next 100 gas, an NG bay, and the 3rd gas. Factory, NG bay, 3rd gas all happen at the same time. As soon as the factory finishes, you start the starport and the reactor on the factory to swap them off and go double medevacs, just like you always do. And that's when you can finally get the add-ons, either 2 reactors or a reactor in a tech lab, like I did here. And then at around 8:30, when the starport is finishing, you'll be able to throw down these 2 extra barracks and have your 5 racks, reacted starport, NG bay, and hopefully 2 reactors and 3 tech labs in some order that made sense to you. And then you want to be getting your 4th gas finally when you're pushing out. And finally, do not engage Protoss until, you see how small this army is right now? Do not engage Protoss until this army has almost doubled in size just because of how much you can reproduce. 3 Marauders at a time and 4 Marines is a ridiculous quantity, so you have to wait for those to pop out in order to fully engage. So there you go. That is Bomber's build. Thanks for watching.